Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei. Today we're going to be looking at the optimal best Minecraft event roster 2025 update, combining MCC, Block Wars, Pandora's Box, Biome Battle, and Minecraft Mayhem, the 5 most notable probably events that we have seen at least in recent history. And we're going to try to make one roster of games that combines everything and makes it the best. This will be my personal opinion, and because this is my personal opinion, I have made something for you to give your input. This is a forum I've created. I will link it in the description down below. This will be for a different video soon. In the description down below, fill out this form. It looks like a lot. It's not that much. It's just a lot of options because a lot of events have different options. And give me your input. I will make a video that makes a compilation of everything, and we'll see the contrast between me favorite version and you favorite version, you know? Anyways, for those of you who've paid a lot of attention to Mogul Mail, you'll know that this is definitely not the first time I've done this. However, the reason I do these videos pretty consistently is because we see a lot of developments happen within the event scene, whether it's new games being added, new events being notable, or other changes such as one that's very relevant for today, a different consensus of what events should be like. More specifically, my consensus on what events should be like has changed, because in the instance you see in front of you right now, this version, the 2024 edition, which was not even a year ago, a little less than a year ago, it was in the summer of 2024, we looked at every single genre of game within events, PvP Battle Royale, PvP Round Robin, etc., put all the options from every game or from every event in there, try to put them in their own category, and then try to get some representation from every type of game mode, and try to make it even. I don't think that's necessary anymore, if we're being completely honest. I think some of you will agree with me, some of you will definitely disagree with me, but some of you will agree that it is unnecessary to have equal representation of every type of game in an event, especially if you have a circumstance like Block Wars, where it's a much lower comp or more variety-based roster, or an instance like PB, where it's a much higher comp and you know, Minecrafter-based roster. So that's one factor. The consensus on what an event should have in terms of inclusion is a little different now. Number two, I don't think you actually get the best Minecraft event by trying to properly equally represent every event's games anymore. I think you could have gotten that previously, but I think things have changed enough to the point where that opinion on what is actually the best in terms of from every event might skew a little bit more in favor of, let's say, MCC or let's say PB or something, right? Like that, right? Also, another thing that I forgot to mention, another major thing that's important here is Block Wars specifically had the Series 3 remake of a lot of things, which has mostly been a significant improvement on a lot of the Block Wars games. For example, if you look at the best event thing that was chosen here, the 4 picks from Block Wars were Blitz Hunt, Extraction, which I think would still be considered some of the better ones, because these barely changed in Series 3, aside from map changes, and then Party and Trailblazers, which are both very interesting inclusions for different reasons. I don't think Party would be included anymore because a lot of people have kind of, maybe not like gotten sick of the game, but more so Party hasn't been able to keep up with the demands of what people want to see from it, and Trailblazers has had a major improvement since this moment in time. So, anyways, let's continue to actually doing this ranking. So this is going to be my opinion, of course, and I have already grabbed every single game and put them in each category from what event they are from, and included everything that I think is either fair or valid to include, or whatever I think people would want to see included. For example, in Block Wars, Rock, Paper, Scissors, which doesn't have an official icon, I think, so I just used one from Google. Rock, Paper, Scissors is included as a finale game option, and in PB, Haunted Havoc represents Hades Havoc from Dragon Pit, and Speedrun will be Speedrun from Dragon Pit specifically. These are not the old versions of the games, these are the Dragon Pit specific versions, which I think is important because we're trying to make the best Minecraft event, and I think these few inclusions are some of the better showings from these events, at least in recent history, to an extent, because the MCC or the Block Wars one was a year ago. Either way. So first, I think we could make a very simple start, finale. I try to put the finale at the start of every event. I don't have one for Mayhem because I don't know if they have an icon for their finale. So the finale options are Dodgebolt, Shockwave, Rock, Paper, Scissors, and Coliseum. I think most people would agree that Dodgebolt has to be the main selection for finale games. It is the strongest contender, and especially impressive for how long it's been running with relatively similar gameplay. It's still considered usually the best, finale for Minecraft event games, for Minecraft events in general. I will say, I think Rock, Paper, Scissors comes in as a special event reserve, and this is probably a good moment to explain what these tiers actually mean. So the selection is the main selection. This will represent what we think would make cohesively the best Minecraft event possible as of right now. I say we, that's what I think. Keep in mind, I will be biased, and with how Block Wars works, etc., my opinion will probably be different from a lot of other people because I am less of a competitive viewer. I'm more of a vibe, whatever-based viewer, right? That doesn't mean that PvP is completely excluded, because we'll get into that as well. Main reserves will be the backup of games that you would want to have in regularly thrown into the mix, assuming that this event would happen multiple times in quick succession, let's say like monthly, right? So you'd want to have games that you could cycle in and out to not just have the same games over and over and over. We did this last time as well, and that's the only distinction we made. We only did main selection and then the backups for games that we think are good enough to include, but maybe not in the main portion of the video. Second thing that we've added here, special event reserves. This is important specifically for my ranking because I think with how I usually view events, some people will be upset at which games are excluded, but I do think that is valid criticism that certain games should be included, which is why special event reserves applies to, let's say you do a much lower comp or a much higher comp event or a silly version or something along the lines of just something unique. There may be specific types of games you'd want to include for that purpose, so that will be another option for what we could include. I don't know what the total amount of games will be. I think we're just going to go off of vibes. Probably stick to 15 is kind of the max that an event has, considering MCC has 15 games, and then with the finale 16 options, although I will say the finale wouldn't be included, right? Anyways, enough yapping. I think, by default, a few things need to be done. We have to grab the generally agreed upon best contenders from events, and they have to be included. Starting with Sands of Time from MCC has to be included. It is considered widely by a lot of viewers, although admittedly mostly MCC-based viewers, which is the larger portion of the viewer base across events. It is widely considered the best game out there. It is one of the best, at least, that most people would agree upon. I think aside from maybe testers, most people would agree that SOT is one of the best showings you'll have in events. I will also add Blitz Hunt from Block Wars has to be up there as well. I think generally considered one of the best showings in the event scene in terms of gameplay. I think it is for sure up there. Now we get something interesting because I think I forgot the name of this game. Temple Lockout is generally considered PB's best showing. However, if we're trying to make a cohesive event, from my perspective, I agree this game should be included. I don't know if it should be in the main selection because I don't know how well this would play for a certain type of audience that I would probably prefer to see in an event. Also, additionally, I guess it should be mentioned now, on the form that's in the description down below, please fill it out. There is also a question on what your favorite event roster is. I obviously can't really fully get into that because by default I will say Block Wars, which probably is actually my answer for what my favorite roster is, right? So I will technically build this around the assumption, hey, we're making a Block Wars roster-centered event, although I understand that has some flaws with it, so I'll just try my best to do whatever I can. So I'll just put Temple Lockout in consideration, also because I think it's very valuable to include one PvP game, or one game from every event, although I think Minor Mania could maybe take the spot. We'll get to that later. We'll do swaps, probably. Biome Battle up next. I think Biome Battle's best game could be Cosmic Construction, and I honestly think Cosmic Construction is definitely, like, in consideration. It is probably the best build game that we can grab besides maybe Factory Frenzy, and then if we want to include Mayhem, I do think Factory Frenzy is slightly better maybe to include, because it is more build focused but still teamwork and other, it's actually a really good game. So I think Cosmic Construction would maybe be a, like, reserve in that regard. I don't know if Biome Battle has very strong showings for the rest in terms of what would be included. I think a task tag could do pretty well. I think Zap and Cap is potentially interesting. I think one thing where Biome Battle will mostly come in right now is more in the reserve, like main reserve category, where I think they have a lot of pretty good games, but I don't think Biome Battle has many games that stand out as the best, which shows that they're very consistent very early on. But because I don't think there's many games that I would consider actually bad, or actually I don't think, besides maybe the farm game, I would not really consider any games actually bad, and then maybe Sprint, but we don't really look at Sprint that much. Also, I think people generally consider Hades Havoc to be included. I do think with the way Hades Havoc is structured, I do think it should be a special event reserve. I think if Hades Havoc was played regularly, especially with the amount of maintenance that is needed to make that game happen properly, I don't think it would be, I don't think it would stand the test of time if it were to be played that often. So I think for special events, for sure, it should be included. That's about it. I also want to include Extraction because I just saw it and realized, why do I not have Extraction up there yet? Then I'm just gonna quick fire a little bit, maybe try to see if I can find some games that for sure need to be included. In terms of like a race game, I think it'd be interesting to include something. I don't really know which race game would be best. I do think Ace Race is definitely up there. I think the Block Wars race game is pretty solid, right? PB Speedrun is cool with the Mario Kart items, though it's a one sample size of we've seen it happen, and I think a lot of people's perspective may be skewed based off of which POV you watch, because if you watch my POV, for example, you'll probably have the same consensus as me, where it's a cool idea, but it maybe doesn't work super well. The Biome Battle race game is interesting. I think the Mayhem race game is alright. I do think with the seasons feature, the consistency of Biome Battle maps is a little bit iffy because you have different features per different thing. It does create some fun possible gameplay that's included, so I think that could be like a nice feature to consider for one of the better games. I also think, generally speaking, the race feels pretty good. I do think there's some things that could be improved, but that's, you know, kind of applies to everything. So maybe I'll give it to Biome Battle. I'll include the Biome Battle race game. That could be recency bias for sure, but I actually think that would kind of make sense to be the included game mode. Then I want to say that Minor Mania should be in for one of the PvP games to maybe be cycled in and out consistently. I think that could be fun. I think a lunge, shocking inclusion maybe, could be really fun for like a special chaos type of event, right? Where there's a lot more memes happening, a lot more goofiness going on. I think a Trailblazers makes sense to include as like a reserve. I think it's a pretty good showing in terms of types of gameplay that applies to multiple different types of players. I think it's pretty friendly for a lot of types of players. Another thing that I think could be interesting is to, and I should actually just remembered, haven't added this to the forum yet. It could be interesting to maybe combine some of the party games and the gauntlet games, and maybe some other games could be thrown into this type of game mode to make kind of a conglomerate party game that could be really fun, in which I think right now the consensus would probably be that Gauntlet's a little bit more fun, although I would argue that if I were to say this should apply to the Block Wars player base, then maybe not, because of some of the games being a little bit more mechanically challenging in that pool of games. So I don't know. I think Order Up could be in consideration. I think Order Up could even maybe be in the main selection, but we'll see. I think Railroad Rush is interesting to throw into consideration. I think Meltdown makes sense to throw into consideration. I do think we kind of hit our max on PvP. I don't think any other PvP game should be included at this point, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is plenty. 5 even if you include lunge, but this would be like very rare, right? So I think 5 PvP games is plenty. I think Cosmic Construction we throw into the backup. I think that's a good one. Oppenslimer I think could be a maybe. I do think there's improvements that could be made. I do think a task tag inclusion could be fun. Again, I already said this. I think you can just drag some of the Biome Battle games in for like at least consideration for the backup. I don't know if we want another dungeon game because we have SOT. I kind of think SOT is enough. I think SOT could be in most events and be fine. It could be in many types of events as well, assuming that this would be a, frequent occurrence type of event. I actually do like Trials of Fire maybe being included as well. I think there's some stuff you could do with Trials of Fire that could be really interesting. I think if you take out some of the mechanically demanding elements of the game mode, I think it could be pretty applicable to a lot of different types of players. You're also going to notice that I'm putting a lot of them in the main reserves is because I don't really know what the main selection should look like yet. So I'm just kind of adding a lot of games to like the backup, and then we'll see what else could maybe work out. I like Hole in the Wall, of course, should be probably included as well. I think Rocket Spleef could be fun, maybe as like a special thing. I think if Rocket Spleef is included less frequently, it'll be appreciated a little bit more, I think. Then Grid Runners is kind of staring at me to maybe want to be included as well. I don't really know why, but I'm kind of liking the potential inclusion of Grid Runners somewhere, because I do think it has potential. Although I would argue maybe that with Trials of Fire, you could maybe kind of hit that, scratch that itch of Grid Runners already. And I think it's kind of like an escape room type of situation, right? Which technically you could say the Trials of Fire to an extent has that too. It's similar in format, so I would say that could be included for sure. And then I'll say special event reserves for both Gauntlet and Party, with the assumption that you'd combine them to an extent, or maybe you would just only have them very rarely to kind of showcase some of those games at an infrequent rate. Then there is the debate maybe that we want to have a backup ace or like a ace race special reserve to maybe throw in as like a occasional race game, maybe, right? You don't maybe want to always play this version. Maybe it'd be nice to have ace race as a backup, though I would say that we're kind of spamming games at that point. Maybe there's too many games that get included if we do that. So let's first actually go through our main reserves and see if we can figure some stuff out. Also, I just realized I've not included any of Mayhem's games yet. I completely forgot about that. So Factory Frenzy's in there. Spleef is an interesting one. Multi-Spleef is on the board potentially. I know we have Rocket Spleef Rush, although I would argue that it's not really Spleef. I think Over-Spleef and Multi-Spleef both do bring up a debate for potential inclusion. We could argue maybe an Over-Spleef where one of the rounds is Multi-Spleef could be good, though that may depend as well. Because the issue I have is Multi-Spleef is probably like better than some of the parts of Over-Spleef, although Over-Spleef does have a really strong standout round with the TNT Spleef round. So I would say maybe we would go that direction, also because I do think Over-Spleef does have a lot of wiggle room in terms of where it can go. So I'll put it in the special event inclusions or special event reserves for now. And then I'll say for main reserves going to this main selection, what are we missing? We have dungeon game, PvP, PvP, race, build. We want another team game, I think, maybe. That'd be nice. So like an order up could be fun, maybe. I think an order up inclusion would be nice. I think the other game should maybe be either movement or like miscellaneous, or maybe both if that does exist. We don't really have that many main reserves in terms of movement, although I think Hole in the Wall inclusion could be interesting. But the only movement we have right now is the race game, so maybe Trailblazers isn't that bad to include there either, unless we want to throw in a different movement game. Though I don't think To Get Your Side would want to be in there. Parkour Warrior probably not. Parkour Tag probably not, because you already have Blitz Hunt. Then you have Blockwars Race, probably not. Chalice Chase is a maybe, although that, as much as that is movement, I do think Chalice Chase should be at least in the backup for like the more higher comp leaning events. I also think at this point we're now saying Minor Mania should go in the main selection, and then we're putting Temple in this special event reserves, probably, or maybe in the main reserves, to be thrown in irregularly. I think that could be interesting. Then I'm really looking at some of these other games and thinking if we're not missing something that should be included for sure. I think Mayhem potentially could have multi-spleef in consideration, at least irregularly. We'll just throw them into the mix for like a alternating spleef inclusion. Although again, I am looking at a potential overload of included games, because at some point you got to consider that less is more, you know? I'm just saying random words at this point. Okay. One thing I also noticed is that we don't have a bingo game right now, and I do think a lot of people would ask for that at this current moment. So I think a bingo but fast special event reserve is not a bad pull either. And then I think we're getting there for sure. We do need at least 2 more, or actually we just need exactly 2 more games in the selection for the main roster, which I think an MCC game would make a lot of sense to be included. We said a movement and a team game. We could just do a team game and a movement game, right? Trailblazers. Although this feels very Block Wars biased, but I mean, that kind of makes sense. Because we have PvP. We have I guess a hole in the wall could be interesting, maybe, for movement-esque gameplay. Although people maybe argue, like, not enough parkour, not enough whatever. But I think Runner's Rampage has plenty of different movement elements in it to maybe be demanding enough to want to be in that main roster. And I do think that a Trailblazers regular reserve inclusion would make sense. And then we just include probably a Railroad Rush, right? I think that's probably it. Would that make sense? We have SOT for team, we have Order Up for team, we have Railroad Rush for team. That is it for team-based games. You then have Minor Mania and Extraction for PvP. You have Blitz Hunt and Hole in the Wall for miscellaneous. Factory Frenzy is your building game, and then Runner's Rampage is your race game, with the finale being Dodge Bolt. I think that would make sense. Though, actually, this probably makes sense. I think with the amount of games that are currently included, there's a lot of swapping you can do, and you could have a lot of different types of events in terms of included games for different player bases, right? Let's say if you were to combine all the player bases as a hypothetical, you could make one that more suits the Hermit audience, and then you could make one that more suits the VTuber audience, etc. And I think with the included games here, you have a lot to work with. So, how many games do we have included? We said roughly 15 should be in the main selection. I think we currently have too many. I think we currently have too many. Because we have, excluding Dodge Bolt, which if we include Dodge Bolt, it should be 16 games. This is currently, I think, 10 in the top row, which means that we would have the slots for 6 in the second row, and we'd need to take out 2. So, we have Temple, which we want to keep for sure. Trailblazers we want to keep for sure. I think we want to say that Task Tag should be in for sure, because I think it has a lot of potential as of right now. I think it's pretty fun. It does feel kind of Blitz Hunt-esque, and maybe having 2 of those types of games isn't the best, but I think it could be nice. I think a Cosmic Construction is a nice inclusion for build games being cycled in and out. I think that could be very valuable. Meltdown is kind of feeling like a potential duplicate inclusion at this point. We have plenty of ranged PvP inclusion. We already have Temple, which, as much as it's not the same format, feels similar. So I don't know if Meltdown should be included as of right now. We probably want... Well, we have Cosmic Construction, so that's the build game extra figured out. Also technically counts as a team game, right? Which I don't think we considered initially. So that should be fine. That does mean that maybe Trials of Fire is unnecessary to also include on top of the current inclusions. I think either Zap and Cap or Up and Slimer has to go, or just Meltdown. I think Meltdown goes. I think Meltdown goes back to MCC. I don't think we even... Maybe for like a special event inclusion we could have it, but even then that category is too bulky right now as well. I think we have to cut down on some of that, even though we have duplicates that we want to maybe consider as well. I do think that maybe Party could be on the bench. I think that's fine. I don't think Party doesn't have to be included. I think Gauntlet can suffice, and Splat's already represented here. Photon isn't really represented, but like there's enough ranged PvP, and there's also already like another party-esque game. I do think that means Oppenheimer should be included for sure. Zap and Cap or Trials of Fire. I think we might put Zap and Cap out of the rotation. So I think this is your main reserves for now. Then you have Hades Havoc. I think Lunge is one of the weaker inclusions here too. I do think you want to have the party game in there. But should Gauntlet be in the main reserves instead or not? I'm not sure. I think Task Tag and Blitz Hunt having similarity kind of is a bit odd, so maybe we swap that. I think that could make sense, right? To have Gauntlet in over Task Tag there. Then we look at Rocket Spleef Rush. Makes sense as an occasional inclusion, would be very nice. I think a Chalice Chase would make sense to have occasionally included as well. Then Bingo, we said that would make sense. I think Spleef would be nice to have in, just a regular Spleef sometimes maybe, but I could also see the argument for that maybe not being good enough to be in the main consideration, though I think that debate is to be had. Multi-Spleef or over-Spleef is definitely a tricky one. Multi-Spleef feels like if it's a special inclusion, it would be more hype than over-Spleef. So I would probably say that over-Spleef goes out of that consideration there. I think a multi-Spleef inclusion would be more interesting. I think the maximum amount of games we have should be 8 in the special event reserves, and we currently have 9, which means that one has to go, and I think that might have to be Lunge, because I think every game serves a purpose, although Lunge for a Chaos or Scuffed type of event would be really, really nice to have. So we have to value, like, where does Meltdown come into play that's not already represented? I feel like that role that Meltdown serves in MCC is filled with Temple Lockout, because if you just make Temple Lockout a ranged only version, yes, it's not the same as Meltdown, but it feels similar. It feels like there's some similarity. I feel like you could kind of get away with that, maybe. And then, or like Zap and Cap, is Zap and Cap something that needs to be included? I'm not sure. It's got some interesting stuff going on, but it feels like maybe that doesn't need to be included either. It is unique in a sense, right? It's a laser tag game. You don't really have a laser tag game in events. But I think one of the Meltdown, Zap, or Lunge has to go, 100%. One of those has to go. We're not going to consider the finale, by the way, in the extra 8. We will make it extra 9, including the finale, because obviously a finale swap is very rare. Okay. So, now it's Meltdown, Zap and Cap, or Lunge, I think is tricky. I know a lot of viewers would probably say Lunge due to the one sample size occurrence where it didn't go perfectly fine. However, I think there's a lot of arguments to be had that may be slightly unfair. Let's look at what PvP we have included, or miscellaneous PvP even as well, right? That is included. We have Rocket Spleef. We have Gauntlet has Spleef in general as well. There is a kind of a Spleef overlap, though you could argue that Gauntlet could kind of just get rid of the Spleef rand and just deal with multi-Spleef occasionally being in, or something along those lines. There is another ranged type of combat, so I think one of the ranged has to go, probably, because this is like Rockets, this is like Splatoon-esque, this is mostly close range, but also has long range in it. This is exclusively long range, this is usually going to be close range. So I think we want to keep Lunge. And then Zap and Cap is more unique than Meltdown. Meltdown's role is kind of already served, so maybe Meltdown does go out. That kind of feels wrong, but like it makes sense. Keep in mind, with the special event reserves, we're trying to include these games for a very specific purpose, for a specific type of inclusion. Higher comp, you're going to have Bingo be included, or something along those lines. Chalice Chase as well, probably. For like a Chaos type of event, a Lunge inclusion, multi-Spleef inclusion would make a lot of sense. A Rocket Spleef would also be in like a higher comp thing. For a Chaos event, you'd also have rock, paper, scissors included. For like maybe a more grandiose event, of course, you'd have Hades Havoc that could be thrown into the mix. I think Task Tag and Zap and Cap have a place to be included, although maybe a main reserve makes a lot of sense for them to also be included. That is kind of tricky. I'm kind of okay with this though. I think this makes sense. This is probably my list. 30 minutes of yapping just to have a result that I don't feel super confident about, but I think it's generally pretty good. So let's actually compare. Can I do this? I can do that. That's fine. Okay, boom, boom. Let's compare. So, SOT is included in the main selection just like last time. This didn't exist. Oh, Railroad Rush did exist. It just wasn't selected. Railroad Rush wasn't selected, but it is included here now. Hole in the Wall makes it out of the game swap pool into the main selection because of the recent consensus changes. So we're just going to actually put the games together in terms of what event they are from, just so it's easier to see which games we picked. Then for Block Wars, we have Blitz Hunt and Extraction still included, but Order Up actually makes a huge leap from not even being picked to also being in the main category. So both Order Up and Factory Frenzy making that big jump. Minor Mania, same thing. Goes from not being included initially to being in the main consideration. Obviously, Renner's Rampage is a new inclusion because Biome Battle didn't exist at this time, and Factory Frenzy remains in the main selection. So technically only 4 games remain. 1 MCC, 2 Block Wars, and 1 Mayhem game stay in that main selection. Then we look at the reserves. We have, from the main roster, or from the best event selection last time, Temple. Trailblazers remains in here as well. We have 2 new inclusions from Biome Battle. Trials of Fire was did not make the cut last time. It does make the cut now, and Gauntlet also did not make the cut last time, I think, right? It did not, but it does now. Then in terms of special event reserves, this didn't exist previously, but it's interesting to note because we may have some representation in here. Although I did just notice something that is missing, and I already know people are going to talk about it. I just realized I forgot about Sky Battle. That may be kind of insane. Hold on, I did just forget about Sky Battle. That is kind of crazy. Okay, is that needed to be fixed, and can we fix it? Is that needed to be fixed, and can we fix it? Does Sky Battle have to be in? Because it does feel like it's very much missing. I just completely forgot about that. Complete oversight on my end. Sky Battle was in the reserve pool last time. It is not even in consideration this time. It probably should be at least in the special event reserve. Over what, though? Over what? I think Lunge kind of just takes a step back here, although it is very much fitting for a Chaos type event. I think a Sky Battle inclusion for like a higher comp event would be super interesting. So I think that would make sense. So that probably is a swap we're making. Although it does kind of hurt to see that, but it makes sense. It does make sense. Regardless, back on track. Trailblazers, like mentioned, was already in. Cosmic, this was already in. We already talked about that. Special event reserves. Hades Havoc didn't exist yet, so that's included for special event reserve. Task Tag didn't exist yet. The Rocket Spleef Rush goes from the swap pool to the special event reserve, mostly because the consensus of the game has declined, generally speaking. Chalice goes from main event slot to special event slot. Makes a lot of sense because of how high comp it is. Bingo goes from backup to special event reserve. Multi-Spleef goes from main slot to special event reserve. New inclusion, Zap and Cap, and then Sky Battle goes from backup to special event reserve. Let me know your thoughts on this. As per usual with these types of videos, there's going to be a lot of disagreeing about what should happen and what shouldn't happen. This is my opinion as of right now. In not even 24 hours from now, I'd probably change my mind. But this is my current moment thoughts on what should be included. Some of these could be swapped pretty easily, but obviously with the amount of events that are around right now and with the improvements that a lot of events have had, it is very difficult to make some of these cuts. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.